Friends, Romans, and countrymen, lend me your ears. Hello and welcome. Hey, hot stuff. How you doing? All right, kid, this is your big moment, see? All you gotta do is smile, look at the camera. Hello and welcome! The reason that you probably clicked on this video is because you either agree or disagree with the title. Let's talk about it. Join me as we venture back into the past. With Need for Speed, The Run. Traveling back 13 years to 2011, I think back to my first glimpse of the trailer for Need for Speed The Run, and I remember being over the moon when I saw the character outside of the car. At first glance, it may not seem like much, but for a kid who grew up with Need for Speed Underground and became hooked on movies like Fast and the Furious, I was hyped to see this game taking that kind of angle. Now, I wasn't expecting this release to blow all of the story games out of the water because, quite frankly, that was never going to happen. But to get a different angle of attack for a franchise that I was already hooked on, that was kind of awesome. For the benefit of those who may not be familiar with Need for Speed The Run, here's a quick rundown of what you might expect playing the game. Story! Before the game starts, we get a screenshot of our wonderful protagonist, Mr. Jack Rourke, and we're given two bits of information: that Mr. Rourke is one of the best drivers in the business, and that he has got himself into trouble with the mob for a debt that he is unable to repay. So right away, when you start this game, you take the identity of this upstanding pillar of the community, and he slowly awakes from a stupor to find himself taped to the steering wheel of a beautiful Porsche Carrera. He comes to just in time to witness himself dangling from a crane arm shortly before the boom releases him into the belly of a crusher. We then get a nice close-up of two guys watching on, seemingly quite pleased with themselves, and it doesn't take much brain goop to realize that these are the ones responsible for his presumable fate. What I like about this opening is that it starts the story in the manner that it means to go on. Now, however you might feel about QTEs, there's nothing quite like throwing a player into the heat of a situation they know very little about, and then sitting back like, what are you waiting for? It's guaranteed immersion. Besides a brief intro screen where you learn his name, you know nothing about the kid, and already his life depends on your very nimble gaming fingers. That might not seem very mind-blowing in the wake of today's stories, but you have to remember this was 2011, and this is predominantly a racing franchise, which up until this point didn't use cinematic storytelling to progress the game. So assuming that you successfully managed to follow the prompts, you would have guided Mr. Rourke to safety. There's a brief escape scene where you outrun a gang of mobsters in an RS4 who follow closely in hot pursuit. If successful, you escape, and then the story begins to unfold. The next scene dawns and you get a shot of Mr. Rourke walking by a restaurant window before he enters and takes a seat. The camera then changes angles to show the person sitting on the opposite side, revealing that he is there to meet his hot friend. Sexy Sam. There's some dialogue exchange and suddenly you get that typical movie vibe. You know the one. The protagonist marginally escapes a deadly encounter and goes to meet with his hot friend, who just so happens to be connected out the wazoo. Not only that, she's also in a position to offer him a lifeline. It even has that do or die movie cliche where the main character is propositioned with a weighty decision that will inevitably outline the rest of the story. You know what? I like you, kid. You got a lot of moxie. You know what I'm gonna do for you? I'm gonna take care of your problem, but it's gonna cost you. So the real question is, are you in or are you out? So eventually, lets him in on the proposal of a POS deal, which is quite frankly rather disrespectful. But seeing as he is arguably one of the most wanted people in San Francisco, unlike Reddit, this seems like one of those situations where beggars can't be choosers. So they make their way to the back of a sketchy looking area and Sexy Sam deposits a briefcase into one of those bell lift thingies. The mysterious shadow on the other side opens the briefcase and seemingly quite pleased with its contents, they replace it with a sat-nav thingy and send it back down. Sexy Sam informs Jack that he will need a car.
Oh, say less.
You then jump into the next scene where you are met with your first car selection. And this is where the action begins. A high-stakes race from San Francisco to New York City. 3,000 miles, 250 drivers, and one scenario that doesn't end with a bullet in the head. Now it happens in segments, but each race is a proportionate jump to the next stage of the run, depending on the kind of race. That can be anything from 1 to 8 places. The there are some nice little cutscenes thrown in. They are nothing special, but overall, they stand to make a nice change of pace from the adrenaline rush of the situation. You get a chance to learn more about Jack's winning personality. For example, you learn that he has a gambling problem, which turns out to be what got him on all that hot water back at the start of the game. You also encounter other characters in the race, and while content is usually limited to stares, thirst, and information screens, it adds a little bit of momentum to see the faces that you will soon be leaving in your dust. You soon encounter your first major cutscene, which ironically cuts one of your races short. And at this point, it looks like the jig is up. I've always wanted to use that in a sentence. Following a timely interruption from some fellow street racers, we get another QTE! And some really cool chase music as Mr. Rourke breaks free and attempts to escape his arrest. One bag activates his cyberpunk implants, evades everything and catches up to Mr. Rourke in no time. But unwilling to be subdued, Mr. Rourke gives him a little bit of that sweet chin music and hops the fence. There's a dog, a hat, and a set of wayward cars, which all culminate with our favorite Mr. Rourke getting away scot-free. Only this time, he has no car. I don't know how much you know about racing, but a car is pretty fundamental. So there you are, tottering along the streets of Vegas when you come across a car showroom that have left three exotic cars out in the open, and you get to have your pick of what will be your next vehicle to victory. You blitz through a few more races and Mr. Rourke gets brake checked by a fool known as Marcus Blackwell. This will mean absolutely nothing to you in the moment, but it will turn out to be both the antagonist of the story as well as the nephew of one of those nameless mobsters. Jumping through a few more races, you end up in a cutscene with Mr. Rourke and talking via the tablet she gave him. And as you closely verge the 3/4 point, informs Jack that the mob is aware of his location. Not long after, you run into Marcus Blackwell again and he pulls out a blicky, which causes Mr. Rourke to become flustered as he spins out into the residing barricade, initiating the next race. Swiftly moving into the final quarter, things are heating up as the competition gets more intense. Now in the downtown district of Chicago, Mr. Rourke is pitted against Marcus Blackwell, but not long into the race you get T-boned by a mob SUV, wrecking your second vehicle and sending you into another foot chase. Enter QTE! And I have to say, this scene was pretty freaking awesome both times I played it. There you are, sprinting across rooftops and jumping from building to building while a helicopter fires its submachine gun at your trail. It's pretty intense, even for a QTE. The scene progresses with Mr. Rourke's escape, and he skillfully jumps down behind a dumpster after seeing a squad car pull up. He waits, and then lunges at the looming officer with quick strikes, knocking him to the ground before peeling off in the squad car. There's then a pretty tense escape run as you're given 7 kilometers and 5 minutes to get out of Chicago. 1 kilometer into your escape, the ante is up as the helicopter returns for round 2. And yes, the vehicle does take damage. It's actually quite difficult to get through this without a restart. What's that, Charlie? Ah, yeah. I managed to do it. Unlike the performance cars that you've had up until this point, the squad car isn't the fastest, the brakes function like Swiss cheese, and its turning circle feels like a London bus. Unless it's controlled by the CPU, in which case you can disregard this entire statement. While the helicopter is on your trail, you have to swerve to avoid the spotlight, which keeps you out of the line of fire, but the handling isn't the greatest, which in my opinion just adds to the tension. This chase continues for the remainder of the distance on screen, and you eventually arrive at a train yard where you flip out and total the car. The scene fades to black, and re-emerges with Mr. Rourke upside down and a message on the screen instructing you to escape from the car. That's when you hear the jingles of the approaching train and realize that you are in line to be flattened. If we might direct your attention to the left side of the vehicle, you will notice a prompt. And should you not miss any of those, then you will have successfully escaped the train yard. The next scene shows Mr. Rourke running through a back alley with in his ear because despite the chaos of the previous scene, he was not only able to protect the large device and the earpiece, but neither of the items have received so much as a scuff and cosmetic damage. She leads him to another showroom, only this time it's Howdy. And once again you get to choose which vehicle will be your transport to victory. Roll on the next scene and you're in your brand new Audi being instructed to get back in the race. You shift your way to more positions until the mob track you down and begin firing at your vehicle as you attempt to win your races. Eventually you enter a chase scene called Escape the Mob, where you must outrun 2 SUVs in the helicopter as they open fire on you relentlessly. I personally found this a lot of fun. You're whizzing through private roads, industrial lands, tunnels, train ports and warehouses, just trying to stay alive under this very heavy fire. This whole section is packed with action. Arguably the most action-packed scene of the entire game, and it is unapologetically fun. So you're driving through a construction site as you continue to evade gunfire. There's actually some really cool action shots which you don't have time to fully appreciate since you're fleeing for your life, but eventually Mr. Rourke gets his sweet payback as he swipes the helicopter with a badass air. The pilot finally bites it, and you escape. In the end, you total the Audi. LOL! And once again, you acquire a new vehicle. does her thing and tells you to go see a man about a dog. Wink wink. You show up to Yuri's Auto Emporium, and once again, you get to choose a vehicle. Now, Yuri is a top underground car dealer, exclusively tier 5, which goes right in hand with the rivals that you'll have in the final leg of the race. Like the champion that you are, you make it through the final group stages, obliterating the remaining rivals and make it to the final leg of the race. Against who else? Marcus Blackwell. This race is the most fun in my opinion, solely because of the varying scenes. Suddenly, Marcus pulls out the blicky again and you're diverted into a subway. You're now jumping from track to track, trying to avoid the oncoming train and the one approaching from the rear. There you are, skillfully drifting around the subway bends while the sound of the approaching train behind you closes in on your position. But eventually a divide opens up and you're able to steer your vehicle to safety. You then enter a shipment yard, and by now you're hitting furious speeds that make this whole part seem super cool as you blitz through the tiny gaps in containers. You drift your vehicle into that final bend, and if you hit the notch right away, which you have to do if you want to be the first through the tunnel, then you make it through safely. And that's it. You have completed the run. The final scene is reminiscent of the start of his adventure as Mr. Rourke enters the diner once again to meet with sexy Sam, who informs Mr. Rourke that as promised, she is taking care of his issue. And seeing as the man has a horrendous gambling problem which was the cause of all this hot mess in the first place, she decided that as a good friend, she would stand by his side and help him through these troubling times.
Or maybe, if you're interested in doubling down, I just got a call.
LOL! So, that's the story. In a nutshell, a fast-paced tale of a man's fate, which is tied to his ability to outrace 249 other drivers, all the while being chased down by police and hunted by the mob. Now, the reason that I like this game isn't because the story is particularly groundbreaking. Because it isn't. It wasn't because they showcased a fleet of futuristic concept cars that we had never seen before. It wasn't because of the cheesy cutscenes. And it most certainly wasn't anything to do with Jack, because quite frankly, you could have replaced him with absolutely anybody, and it wouldn't have made a difference to a damn thing. No shade to Sean Farris, he's actually a rather good actor. It's the pure fact that the developers took a leap of faith and decided to use an actual story as the driving factor for the game. They merged narrative, racing, characters, scenery, and the feel of a never-ending chase into a single package and position the player in the center of it all. You feel everything. You feel the tension in the cutscenes, you feel the competitiveness in the races, and that added bit of tension as you pull towards the front of the pack, only to get hit moments later with that slow-motion intro with the police waiting on standby. You feel the experience in the climate and geographical changes. For that reason, some of my favorite challenges were South Dakota 44 and the Valley of Fire, simply because of their amazing ambience. It felt like you were literally about to enter a storm, and the tone of the scenery was just perfect. Summit Independent Pass in the race down the mountain, the exploding environs and avalanches, zipping through the tunnels at 140 miles per hour as the sound of your engine reverberates around the walls. You also feel the challenge as the game adapts along with your progression. You feel the ambience shift as you're streaming through the mountains, cities, countrysides, and highways. It's the ever-changing environments and scenery that keep your eyes and mind engaged and flowing along with the story. Now, no review is ever really complete without a pros and cons list, so let's start with what I liked. I really enjoyed the smaller details, like the XP gains you receive for clean passes, dirty passes, perfect runs and hitting top speeds, jump bonuses, rapid pass multipliers, and most of all, I just liked the way that the message popped up, the way it kind of flickered as it came into the shot. I found that really cool. To beat the Deleon crew was really fun. When you see the way that they glide around the icy bends with no traction loss, you can't help but laugh. That was literally the funnest part of the level for me. Hop, takedowns. I really liked the slow motion action cap, and when it happened, I thought it was really cool. It was nice that it wasn't overdone in terms of frequency, because that could have gotten really monotonous really quickly. Though I do wish they would have implemented some sort of momentum bar that you could trigger that animation. It just would have been really cool to have some sort of control over it. There were checkpoint races, which I really enjoyed. I like the countdown timer and the music selection, which hits on tension perfectly. I also like the XP you got for close call, good and perfect time checks that gas you up. Battle races were also interesting. I thoroughly enjoyed these. I found these the most satisfying. At any moment, it felt like the races could have gone either way, and I really enjoyed that. And finally, you had the rival races. These were so cool and horrifically unforgiving. All of your rivals have some super specs under their hoods because they take off like rockets. And once they make a gap, it's extremely hard to close it. And I'm all about that. It's also awesome that once you beat your rival, you get to add their car to your collection, but you won't get that magic mushroom speed boost they seem to have when they boost past you. I really really like the soundtrack, and I genuinely feel like it wouldn't have hit the same without it. And if there was one thing that I had to give EA props for, it would be their soundtrack selections. No matter what game it was, they always managed to make my eardrums feel some type of way. I mean, I'm casting my mind back all the way to FIFA 99 on this, and boy, when that Blur Song 2 hit, I liked the live environments. You know, the little details. The ones you just can't fully appreciate on your first playthrough because you're so focused on getting that #1 victory spot, like the beautiful landscape of Red Mountain Pass. It genuinely looked amazing. The beautiful autumn scenery and color grading in Pine Grove Road, the scenic tone in South Dakota 240, the depth in Ellery Lake and the battle downhill was such a vibe. And I could go on, but I think I've made my point here. I did have a positive point to make about the selection of cars, but with the closure of the online servers, unless you're like me and really enjoy challenges purely for the sake of them, you're probably not going to get much out of that. The mob scene, driving through the train yards, tunnels and construction sites were a lot of fun. The exploding structures and constant gunfire was hyper intense, and it really kept you on the edge of your seat. So now that I've gone through a few of my likes, it's only fair that I balance it out with the... While I like having the ability to change cars, I'm not so thrilled with the petrol stations being the way to do it. My primary issue is that it just kills your momentum, and a close second are the positions and frequency of these stations. They just make no sense to the logic of a race. One example my mind goes back to was when I was racing the De Leon crew. My mind completely blanked and I forgot which game I was playing. So I pulled into the petrol station, which was situated about 0.4 miles away from the end, and as you can imagine, I ended up killing my momentum and I came last. LOL! Me personally, I don't mind restarting the race because I was having fun, but afterwards I started thinking, why is that there? What possible benefit could that provide being where it is? This whole race, you are but milliseconds between each car. What possible reason could you have to put a petrol station 0.4 miles from the finish line knowing what it does? I just don't get it. Sexy Sam. I like Sexy Sam. I do. I also thought it was a nice touch to have the protagonist engage with a character that has been established as a friendly, but give the woman something to say. Because other than her chiming in with pointless takes like,
"Watch out, Jack, it's about to get icy."
Why are you telling him this? The man is literally driving on the snow. He can see that it's icy. How about slipping in a witty pun or a clever joke? Or here's a crazy thought, something helpful. Another thing I don't like is that the police seem to have this tunnel vision. I don't mind intervention. In fact, most of the time I welcome it. But when your rival already takes corners like Waluigi on X Games mode, it's kind of cheesy to watch them skate ahead unscathed while you battle 5 cop cars. Case in point, Calvin Garrett, which leads me to my next I don't like. The repeated rival battles. Why am I rebattling someone who I beat like 9 stages ago? Didn't I win their keys? Like, how are they still in the competition? Case in point, Calvin Garrett. The cheesy loading screens with character sob stories that nobody cares about. Not only are they pointless additions that have no bearing on anything, but trying to give depth on a 13-second loading screen with 3 lines and a mugshot just seems lazy. I kind of touched on this before, but how the police just zone in on you. There is no immediate way to eliminate a police car from your pursuit, at least not actively. I think I remember one time where a police car tried to ram me and just ended up taking itself out, which was cool, but at the same time, like, what? So when those squad numbers start climbing from 1, 2, 3, 4, and sometimes even 5, it starts to feel less like a test of skill and more like a test of patience. Because as you continue to battle against the police and notice that your opponent is just simply getting away from you, you're kind of looking at the game like, what is it that you want me to do here? Now at some point during the game, you're going to come across a set of mob SUVs. And it's at this point that you will get a message on the screen which says, avoid gunfire. Now unless you're Steven Seagal, there is no sure way to avoid gunfire. The only thing that you can really do is drive as fast as you can, which is what you do anyway in a race, which makes this whole message just pointless. It's just a vague message, but it's so vague, it almost insinuates that the answer is obvious, which makes it frustrating. Now I can make a more extensive pros and cons list, but I think for the sake of this video, this will suffice. For its time, I feel like the graphics were beautiful. I really enjoyed looking at the game. Now, I'm aware that people will disagree with that, which is perfectly fine. But that's just how I feel. That's the vibe I got from playing the game, both in 2011 and just now in 2024. I still feel that it looked beautiful, although It should be said that I played it on PC now, so, you know, there's a large difference there in hardware capability. The car selections were okay, I think. Realistic to the story here would be the best term to use because they were a sensible fit. Sure, it wasn't the most carbon you've ever seen in a Need for Speed game, but that wasn't a deal breaker for me. I grew up on Need for Speed Underground too, and as I got a little bit older, I started to watch movies like Fast and the Furious. So naturally, that left me with a hunger to want to experience that kind of action alongside a racing game. Is it the best story you'll ever see in a video game? Not by a long shot, but it was exactly the kind of experience that I wanted when no other game had offered it. As you might imagine, in terms of sales, it didn't do quite as well as the others in the franchise. It actually did quite poorly. The reasons for that varied, but most commonly it seemed to be the lack of customization, the lack of open world, the very short story, complaints about the car handling, and a frustration that races seemed scripted. I can honestly say that I understand the mixed reviews. Do I agree with them? To a certain extent. The story was extremely short and left a lot to be desired. The customization really isn't there, which, when you consider the storyline, wouldn't really make sense if it were. And the stages were indeed platform. There was no exploration, which is what was really wanted at the time by a lot of people. Unbound. What? But the defining question is, did this ruin the experience for me? And the answer to that is no. Again, the story isn't a scene breaker, but at the end of the day, a video game is supposed to provide enjoyment, and for its presence, although underwhelming, I think the story fit the purpose of the game. Now don't get me wrong, I would have loved for this release to reach a higher level of visual and performative standards, but when I think about all the aspects of the game, my mind reverts back to my childhood, where I used to love playing in the arcades. Okay, I still love playing in the arcades. And the death of Trocadero will forever live on in my heart, but I have so many fond memories of games like Daytona Racing and MotoGP because they were purely based on arcadey fun, and in many ways, I feel like this game tried to recapture that kind of fun, all while trying to bring a new experience to the player. I think that balance was very wrong, but I liked the reach. Was it a home run? Not by a long shot. But was it fun? My answer to that is yes. Yes, it was. For the first time, you were able to follow the character and their story outside of the car in a plot that was built into the game with intent. That's not to diminish the critiques of the game. I can agree that some of the races do feel scripted, and I knew that before going in that QTEs were going to rub a lot of people the wrong way. Though I will say that while the handling and turns can be unforgiving, especially in the harder difficulties, I found that it got a lot easier once you settled into the groove of the game. Timing, the speed on entering, the cornering, the drifting, all had their own learning curve, and the game showed me no respect for thinking that just because I built up an efficiency in another Need for Speed, that even normal mode was going to come to me with any ease. I can see why people found that grating, but it didn't ruin the experience for me. So yes, there will be several orders of frustration at various points during your playthrough. Some will be minor grievances, and others will be much larger gripes. Now, while there were a handful of issues that ruined this experience for a handful of people, I thoroughly enjoyed this game. And I did that in spite of its flaws. It's far from a masterpiece, and it could have stood to undergo a lot of improvements, which I think a remaster would have gone a long ways towards bettering. But when I think back to 2011 and my early memories of this game, the prospect of another run somewhat excites me. So, from its diverse races taking place in a variety of districts from countrysides to mountains, its cinematic driving and QTE escape scenes that quite frankly do a great job in capturing and translating the nature of the fast-paced action, the inclusion of the mob and police pursuits in races added an extra layer of tension to the challenge, and the one-on-one battles with explosive environments and tumbling scenery. I really enjoyed this game when I played it way back when on PS3. And I have nothing but fond memories of it. That's why, in my opinion, Need for Speed The Run deserves better. I don't know if anybody's gonna watch this or even get this far into the video, but agree? Disagree? Let me know. So as always, if you made it this far into the video, thank you very much for watching. And hopefully I'll see you on the channel for the next video adventure, whatever that might be. But until that time, this is Frisky Penguin, signing out, wishing you a very good day, a good night, and a good game.